Claire Thompson adjusted her designer sunglasses, her eyes unyieldingly fixed on the departures board at JFK Airport. Even amidst the bustling crowd of hurried travelers and flustered families, Claire exuded an air of unflappable composure. She was a woman accustomed to the rhythm of conquest, whether it be sealing high-stakes business deals or navigating through elite social circles. Today, her destination was Atlanta, where the prospect of a lucrative new contract awaited her. Yet, all she could feel was the nagging impatience familiar to those who despise delay. Her phone buzzed incessantly, a stream of emails that demanded her attention until, weary of the noise, she tucked it into her tailor blazer. Instead, she scanned the lounge, the cacophony of boarding announcements interlacing with the unmistakable sound of clinking coffee cups. A figure caught her eye. He was a tall, robust man clad in army fatigues, his presence distinguished and contrasting against the casual travelers that filled the room. Claire's gaze lingered momentarily on him, curious at first, then dismissive, a soldier, just another traveler in a crowd she had no interest in. As boarding commenced, Claire moved skillfully towards the gate, her stride one of assured efficiency. The instant she crossed into the first-class cabin, she breathed in the distinct scent of leather and polish. Easing into seat 2A, she began organizing her documents, eyeing the in-flight amenities with satisfaction. Moments later, her tranquility was interrupted as the soldier appeared in the aisle, maneuvering his way through the narrow passage with a backpack slung over his shoulder. Claire noticed him approaching and instinctively tightened her grip on the armrest. She hoped he would be elsewhere in the cabin, anywhere but near her sanctuary of status and comfort. To her chagrin, he stopped at the seat adjacent to hers. As he reached to store his backpack, it brushed inadvertently against her seat. It was a slight disturbance, but Claire's practiced patience snapped. "Watch it," she hissed before she could rein in her thoughts. The words were sharp, tinged with an undertone of something darker, a prejudice nurtured by years of unexamined assumptions and inherited biases. The soldier paused, straightening to meet her gaze. His eyes were calm, disarming in their sincerity as he responded softly, "Sorry, ma'am. I'll be more careful." His voice was even tempered, lacking any ire. There was something in it, a resilience, perhaps, that challenged Claire's unspoken narrative. But the old defenses rose swiftly, quashing any spark of conscience. The cabin had fallen briefly silent following her outburst, passengers watching with varying degrees of interest and discomfort. Claire turned away, feeling the prickly heat of judgment resting briefly upon her shoulders, though she wore it like armor, convincing herself that she was justified in her reaction. As the flight took off, Claire feigned concentration on her work. Yet, in the periphery of her mind, she was hyper-aware of the soldier beside her. Bryce Daniels, she imagined his name was. She had overheard it when the flight attendant checked his details. He seemed to command a presence that was both quiet and formidable, an impression only heightened by his posture and the casual conversations he had with the staff, punctuated by genuine smiles. Despite her efforts to block him out, Claire's awareness of Bryce lingered, an unease she attributed solely to the earlier disturbance and nothing more. She barely noticed hour by hour pass, until suddenly, the aircraft jolted with a ferocity that yanked Claire from her thoughts. Gasps erupted around, and Claire's heart thudded in her chest, the illusion of safety shattered by unforeseen turbulence. All at once, the calm demeanor of Bryce Daniels became pronounced. He rose from his seat, no hesitation in his movements, and assisted passengers with a nimbleness that belied the chaos around them. A mother struggling with a crying toddler, an elderly gentleman who appeared too shaken to move, all were supported devoid of ceremony, his presence exuding a stabilizing force. Claire watched, a spectator to his transformation. Bryce was no longer simply a passenger. He was a protector, a leader, subtly commanding respect and gratitude from frightened travelers. Her own fear was tempered by observing his actions, yet it clashed violently against the narrow image she had crafted of him in the liminal space of her prejudice. When the turbulence subsided and the plane found its rhythm once more, Claire felt a wave of uncharacteristic embarrassment. She remained immobile, her gaze locked on the seatback screen, not daring to meet the astonished yet reluctant admiration she saw mirrored in others' faces. As they landed unexpectedly in Charlotte, the urgency of the situation slowly dissipated. Passengers began disembarking, Claire among them, highly aware of Bryce in the throng. When at last she stood outside the airplane, sunlight washed over her, yet the usual warmth of clarity eluded her. A peculiar sensation of being stripped bare in her error lingered instead. It was when Bryce, too, exited, shining sunlight catching the insignia on his uniform, that Claire felt the residue of her earlier words settle like a weightier specter. He passed nearby, her wallet slipping unnoticed from her furled jacket as she adjusted her carry-on. Without hesitation, Bryce picked it up, calling out to her. "Excuse me, ma'am," he said, extending the wallet with a respectfully gentle smile that overshadowed her earlier rebuke. Stunned by the gesture, Claire managed a terse, "Thank you," her mouth struggling to form the words. Bryce nodded, reassuring with a simplicity that echoed the tranquil strength she had witnessed only hours before. Their eyes met briefly, a connection tempered by a simmering recognition of what had passed between them. As he moved on, Claire was left with a burgeoning disquiet that gnawed at her, the burgeoning hint of a truth she could no longer ignore, one that foreshadowed the stark self-revelation awaiting her upon her return home. Claire Thompson adjusted her designer sunglasses, her carefully curated chic exterior masking the anticipation and impatience churning within. The departures board at JFK Airport lit up intermittently, taunting her with yet another delay announcement. She should have already been airborne, cruising at 35,000 feet en route to Atlanta. It was a familiar route marked by businessman's cell phone posturing and the clack-clack of laptop keyboards. But today, an unease proliferated her being. Peering over the rim of her sunglasses, Claire surveyed the bustling sea of travelers. It was a weekday, which meant the airport was a hive of determined business people and hairy vacationers. Her mind danced around the impending meeting in Atlanta, where closing a multimillion-dollar deal awaited her deft negotiation skills. That focus shifted, caught by something unexpected. Through the crowd, a figure caught her attention. Towering above the clusters of bodies was a man whose presence was both commanding and understated. He wore army fatigues, the deep greens and browns of the fabric distinguishing him from the casual flotsam encircling him. Broad shoulders bore the weight of years, quite possibly lived under duress, yet they stood unbowed. His posture and measured stride spoke quietly of discipline and integrity, both of which clashed awkwardly with Claire's preconceived notions that simmered beneath her polished exterior. Their boarding group called. The surge forward was orderly yet fervent. Claire, accustomed to navigating both social spheres and literal crowd, found herself effortlessly gliding toward the gate. As she entered the first-class cabin, the familiar scent of leather and polished would ease some of the restiveness clouding her mind. Seat 2A was her sanctuary, meticulously chosen for its strategic position, a window to the world with just the right amount of isolation from the bustling aisle. She busied herself with her documents, her fingers dancing across contracts and reports as her eyes occasionally flicked toward the unobtrusive opulence. A glass of chilled champagne, a soft cashmere blanket folded with pristine precision. Just as she began losing herself in the cascade of spreadsheets, a shadow stretched across her field of vision. It was the soldier, his passageway across the cabin bearing an inadvertent grace. He stopped at the seat beside hers, a realization that made Claire's spine stiffen instinctively. As Bryce Daniels, she would discover later not from introduction but from overheard snippets of conversation, attempted to store his unwieldy backpack in the overhead compartment. It brushed against Claire's seat. The motion, slight to the point of inconsequentiality, was enough to trigger something primal within her, a collision of territory, status, and unacknowledged prejudices surfacing like oil on water. Claire's voice sliced through the muted ambience before conscious thought could temper it. "Watch it." The words were sharp, needled with misconceptions passed down like heirlooms. They hung briefly in the stale cabin air, a representation of something decidedly unyielding and Victorian in its tonality. It was a reflex, a lapse that exposed the ugliness hidden beneath practiced sophistication, a gut reaction fueled by ingrained mistrust and societal indoctrination. Bryce Daniels, composed and unflappable, paused. He leveled her with a gaze that was neither accusatory nor condescending, but held an inscrutable depth, as if he were weighing possibilities in a brief appraisal. His voice, when it emerged, was calm and without rancor. "Sorry, ma'am. I'll be more careful." For Claire, it was an unsettling moment where the soldier's unflinching composure met her internal discord, an intersection that would not be neatly folded away. She felt the pulse of eyes upon her from others in the cabin, sensing judgment and curiosity animating the silence. Yet she resettled back into her seat, wrapping herself in an imaginary cocoon of unchallenged privilege. The flight took off, a gentle upward climb that settled the dim cabin into serene ambient light. Claire struggled to recenter her focus on work, but the seeds of unease sown by the soldier's presence subtly burgeoned. Every shift of his figure in the periphery of her vision scratched at her concentration. She heard snippets of his conversation with a flight attendant, flanked by easy laughter, a few measured exchanges about being homebound after months away, and the beauty of autumn in their destination city. His bearing reflected a shared narrative, his countenance perpetually courteous, and his smiles frequently offered without suspicion lingering at the edges. All of this was disarming. Hours drifted by, uneventful until the lull was shattered unexpectedly. The airplane was rocked by violent turbulence that roused panicked cries and flustered gasps for passengers. Claire's heart pounded audibly, her knuckles blanching white as she gripped the armrest. It was then Bryce Daniels transformed, swiftly rising from his seat with an ease molded by trained instinct. He moved through the cabin, weaving assistance amidst cries and confusion, offering assurance to a frazzled mother, aiding an elderly man rewind his fallen cane. His calm, authoritative presence provided more solace than the curt directives from the flight crew. If Claire's earlier opinionaries cast him as an unwelcome interloper, now they were forcefully rewritten by his actions under duress. She watched, caught between her own trepidation and a dawning recognition of the man's intrinsic leadership. This was who he was, a protector, a leader, a steward of courage. The turbulence abated, yet as the aircraft steadied on its path, the turbulence inside Claire's mind gathered forth. The image she had mentally painted of Bryce shattered, replaced with an indelible impression that defied her initial misplaced assumptions. Touching down in Charlotte, an unscheduled stop, escalated the reality of their shared experience, a shared glance as passengers unbuckled and rose to disembark. Cloaked in warmth and familiarity, sunlight streamed from the windows into the cabin. Claire, her rigid facade uncoiling imperceptibly, faltered momentarily as her wallet slipped unnoticed from her snug jacket pocket. It was Bryce, ever attentive, who called out to her. "Excuse me, ma'am," he said, extending the wallet with a countenance lightened by a gentle smile. It was a gesture of respect that belied no animosity, an embodiment of the values he carried. Claire's response was stilted, a fractured "thank you" that barely masked the multitude of words unsaid, lingering on the tip of her tongue. A complex exchange of gazes followed, a hesitant connection, softened by recognition of her earlier misjudgment. It was a moment bordering on transformative, one that laid the groundwork for the realization that was destined to unfold once she returned to Atlanta. Bryce moved onward into the airport, while Claire stood momentarily rooted, drenched in sunlight outside. It should have been a straightforward return to reality, yet everything appeared slightly altered, tinged with peculiar insight into her own entrenched preconceptions, now under the slow warmth of dissolving light. As the plane climbed steadily across the sky, the low hum of the engines ushered in an unexpected tranquility. First-class passengers, having settled into their opulent cocoons, flipped on reading lights or eased into light conversation. Claire, however, was wrestling with her internal upheaval. The soldier's presence beside her was an irritating reminder of her earlier lapse, his calm in the face of her hostility a stark counterpoint to her internal turbulence. The cabin lights dimmed further to accommodate the descent into early evening. Claire found herself reflecting unwittingly on the soldier, whose poise seemed incongruous with the man she'd harshly judged moments before. There was a dignity in his bearing and a serenity in his countenance that rivaled the calm of the descending night. Her attempts to redefine her irritation in the face of an unfamiliar emotion, respect, were interrupted by the sudden sharp jolt of the aircraft. With little warning, the smooth trajectory of their flight was shattered by violent turbulence, sending trays and drinks clattering ominously in their holders. Screams and cries erupted briefly, like surfacing bubbles, swiftly crushed by renewed silence. For Claire, time fractured as the plane rocked side to side, a roller coaster of invisible chaos in the sky. Sentiments of fear mingled with fragmented judgments, and her rigid shell of indifference began to crack. Her eyes darted to Bryce, whose expression remained unperturbed. She watched with an involuntary respect as he unstrapped himself and rose, his broad shoulders steadying as the aircraft lurched. Bryce moved with purposeful calm through the cabin, his voice, a somehow resounding comfort, carrying a calming authority as he interacted with fellow passengers. "Let's get you seated, ma'am," Claire overheard, his calm assuredness pouring into the young mother struggling to calm a crying infant. His hand reassured passengers gripped by panic, his unexpected kindness a lifeline against growing fear. In his actions, Claire saw not the embodiment of the preconceived defiance she had assumed, but a naturally altruistic figure whose abilities to lead and reassure defined him. "Are you okay, ma'am?" Bryce asked gently, turning his attention back to Claire for a fleeting instant. His query held no judgment, just genuine concern. Claire, swallowing her pride alongside her fear, nodded weakly, biting back words that suddenly seemed inadequate. Her grip on the armrest loosened slightly, an unconscious gesture of slowly yielding trust. Bryce lingered only a moment before continuing to provide solace to others, a stabilizing force amidst uncertainty. Claire watched him tirelessly assist the flight crew, admiration creeping unwillingly into her conscious judgment. The turbulence gradually subsided, ironically timed to the calm Bryce's efforts secured over the cabin. As the captain's voice crackled reassuringly over the intercom, notifying of an unscheduled landing in Charlotte due to the disturbance, Claire's mind lingered on the immediacy and sincerity of Bryce's calm. He was a soldier accustomed to crisis and resolve, a far cry from the man her mind had chosen to vilify. Upon landing, and amidst the communal shuffle of passengers unbuckling belts and rising to reclaim personal effects, Claire remained seated, her thoughts running over the day's surreal turns at a breakneck pace. She couldn't shake the dissonance between her impulsive judgment and the man's exhibited integrity. Claire was enveloped in this reflection when her wallet slipped from her pocket, unnoticed amid the din of disembarking passengers. "Excuse me, ma'am," came Bryce's voice, clear to her even through the surrounding hubbub. Turning to face him, Claire's eyes met Bryce's steady gaze. He extended her wallet with an expression that harbored no smugness or reprimand but simply kindness. His unaffected smile bore no grudge, his expression an open canvas of patient understanding. "Thank you," Claire found herself muttering, the simplicity of those words failing to capture the magnitude of her internal chaos. Her voice was finally softened, straying into something warmer, unrefined. Bryce nodded, taking a subtle step backward to allow her to reclaim her belongings, and offered her one final nod that seemed, in its understated way, a mark of acceptance. The unraveling fairness of the moment felt bizarre and fragile, as if a bridge had been extended, a crossing still tentative in its descent. As Bryce turned and exited the plane into the airy brightness of the terminal, Claire found herself momentarily tethered to her seat. It was the illusion of choice, the reality that the small assumptions she'd harbored with unyielding certainty were now laid bare and exposed. Emerging into the sunlit terminal, she was greeted by the vibrant chaos of fellow travelers, an earthy grounding replete with conversations and rushing strides. Yet somewhere, amidst the reflective surfaces and piercing light, a footprint of Bryce Daniels remained, etched in her evolving awareness, a puzzle she felt compelled to explore further. Claire's footsteps echoed hollow against polished floors as she allowed the undisguised light to mingle with and dissolve yesterday's shadows within her. There was change afoot, something promising and inevitably true initialized by an unexpected hero thrust into her prejudice-laden world. Be it turbulence in midair or in the heart, it all circled back to a moment in transition, when old foundations shift ever so slightly but powerfully, casting new shapes in bold realizations and the power that emerges from confronting genuine perspectives worth embracing. The aircraft hummed as it sliced through the waning evening light, immersing the first-class cabin in a gentle, descending haze. Claire Thompson leaned back, her fingers rhythmically traipsing over the armrest. Yet beneath her curated facade of calm, a relentless churn of introspection echoed. Her earlier exchange with the soldier still danced defiantly in her mind's eye. Despite her attempts to dismiss him as mere inconvenience, Bryce Daniels' unflappable demeanor persisted like an unending tune she couldn't quite shake off. Even as the labyrinthine lacework of clouds parted for a setting sun, Claire's thoughts refused to disentangle. Bryce, a composed tower amidst the celestial tranquility, haunted her every observation. Repeatedly, she replayed the scenario, a fleeting exchange of animosity rebuffed by unwavering grace. Struck by how naturally Bryce embodied virtues she had purposefully overlooked, Claire was yet unwilling to fathom if her reflection uncovered an inconvenient admiration. However, her internal theater abruptly halted when a sudden, violent thrust of turbulence spun the aircraft into chaos. The cabin erupted, first-class passengers exchanged frantic glances, eyes wide with shared alarm. An opera of seatbelt clinks and abandoned comfort rings erupted as reality spiraled into the unexpected. Claire's worldly rhythm shattered as the plane convulsed, an unseen marionette manipulated by tempestuous skies. The descent into unrest cut Claire free from baseless prejudice, steering her focus onto scattered fragments of her own fragility. She clutched her armrest as if tethered to a lifeline in a fathomless sea. Suddenly maternal instincts kicked in, or maybe it was survival instincts, as she sought comfort in recognizing another's composed strength. Her eyes traced back to Bryce, surprised to find solace in his unfolding reliability. Bryce's unperturbed expression was an anchor amidst disarray. Claire watched, transfixed, as he unbuckled himself with swift professionalism. Standing unshaken amid the lurching cabin, he transformed seamlessly from passenger to stabilizer. His voice radiated authority, enveloping panicked natures with tranquil assurance. He moved sure-footedly towards a young mother battling with a wailing infant, his aspects alight with calm fortitude. "Ma'am, take slow breaths, focus on me. I'll make sure you're seated safely," he instructed, his presence a balm to the cacophony. His every action was drenched with genuine concern, cascading over surrounding fear like the first rays of dawn warming the coldest night. The clarity of his intent penetrated Claire's own constructed walls, whispering of a world that stretched beyond the confines of her prejudice. Bryce's actions resonated, a ripple effect she couldn't ignore despite a lifetime security at arm's length. "Are you okay, ma'am?" Bryce's voice reached her, shining with polite inquiry rather than retribution. Firmness wavered in her reply as she nodded, forced to acknowledge her ashen knuckles gripping the armrest had relaxed somewhat. Words, simple but sincere, were all she could muster. "I am," she replied, her voice newly fretted, softened with gratitude unburdened by pride. It was one of life's ironies, that faith restored could originate not from similarity, but from kindness unspoken, manifest amid strife. Even as Bryce resumed nurturing calm throughout the cabin, Claire saw his motives materialize as more than duty. There was humanity and valiance poised on commonplace foundations, appending preconceived notions with silent assurance. As the aircraft stabilized and the turbulence relinquished its volatile grasp, the cabin's collective breath hummed in relief, murmured thanks whispered into fate's accepting arms. Listening with bated breath, Claire found her own emerging gratitude, complex yet suffused in Bryce's unyielding serenity, half-formed deeds interlacing with renewed clarity. The captain's voice crackled gently across the intercom, interrupting reverie. "Ladies and gentlemen, an unscheduled landing in Charlotte is necessary due to extreme weather conditions. We apologize for the inconvenience." An electric buzz of unity and shared ordeal tempered the communal shuffle to disembark as passengers reclaimed hand luggage with murmured thrill at averted disaster. Claire remained seated, each heartbeat a drum of reshaped perspective. Her judgment, a prejudicial error, was now shredded and exposed by Bryce's simple virtue. In the nerve-tingling tumult of reboarding, Claire's concentration was unmoored, her steely defenses too freshly fractured. She hadn't felt the small, critical slip. The wallet that tumbled from her pocket disappeared unnoticed until Bryce suddenly emerged once again to stand before her. Caught within the orbit of his unexpected kindness, she blinked up in surprise. "Excuse me, ma'am," he said smoothly, offering her lost item with an unembellished gesture of good fortune. "Thank you," she spoke, her voice a modulated whisper, a soft acknowledgement of Bryce's quiet integrity. Their eyes met briefly, a shared understanding unadorned and without pretense. Bryce accepted Claire's gratitude with a nod, extending no judgment or superiority, only embodying what seemed instinctive humility. Then, magnanimous in modesty, he withdrew quietly, granting her space to gather and leave. It was a moment tuned with possibilities unexplored, a shift in perspective kindled by turbulence grasped amid the honest relief of nurturing light. As Bryce moved away, Claire considered closing the worn yet comfortingly familiar door back into the certainty of disdain, but an inclusive arc of understanding traced the sky above them. Cradled in newfound comprehension, she rose to meet the engrossing vitality of the terminal, blending effortlessly into the commonplace commotion. Memories of her mother's lullabies floated unbidden to Claire's senses, corrodes of whispers promising illumination when the journey threaded truth. She no longer stepped as though their chosen paths lay sealed in judgment. She wanted her footsteps redirected towards Brit's exchange values. Prejudice gave way to respect on wings of circles completed exactly where they were born, inside the heart willing to embrace change without temperance. It was nothing short of a revelation. Bryce's actions embarked her on promise amid everyday experiences, a call sign for the tangible beauty of unexpected beginnings imbued with grace. The world outside transformed into a kaleidoscope of vibrant hues as Claire settled into her hotel suite in Charlotte, the unscheduled landing still unsettling her thoughts. After a long day of travel and unexpected events, she sought solace in familiar routines, shoes slipped off in methodical precision, luggage opened with practiced finesse. Yet, beneath the structured ballet of her actions, echoes of Bryce Daniels' composed grace on the turbulent flight haunted her. Seeking distraction, Claire flicked on the television, expecting it to weave a comforting background noise through the silence of her suite. The broken rhythm of tired news anchors discussing mundane topics washed over her. But gradually, as her senses attuned, snippets of a news segment penetrated the haze. In today's headlines, began the anchor, his voice resonating with sincerity, we celebrate the inspiring humanitarian efforts of Sergeant Bryce Daniels, a soldier known not only for his dedication but for his incredible bravery in war-torn regions. Claire's hand hesitated mid-reach for the glass of water on the nightstand, her attention magnetically pulled to the unfolding scene on screen. The face she had unwittingly dismissed with disdain now filled the television frame, a portrait of conviction and compassion. Bryce appeared in candid footage, leading relief missions amidst devastation, his actions resonating a quiet heroism that transcended borders and time. His pale fatigue seemed to absorb light, reflecting only his intent and a powerful, enduring empathy that transcended his environment. Sergeant Daniels recently received accolades for his instrumental role in a mission, the anchor continued, overlaying visuals of smiling locals grasping at hope left in Bryce's wake. His efforts secured the lives of countless individuals, showcasing the indisputable impact of one determined individual. Claire felt a jolt, the kind that tumbles unsaid truths into crystalline clarity. She sank into the plush embrace of the hotel armchair, heart pounding with the weight of revelation. Each word became a hammer, shattering the justifications constructed in the comfort of her prejudice. A peculiar silence fell over her physical world as Bryce's narrative wove itself through her awareness, threading together strands of regret and the first pricklings of recognition. Without prompting, her mind sharply replayed Bryce's unwavering calm on the plane, how he steeled himself in the eye of passengers stormed by fear, offering solace where fury could have reigned supreme. Any lingering doubt about his character dissolved under the authority of his selfless service. Colors dappled anew in her mind, vibrant yet soothing, whispering of the virtues she had blinded herself to. Overcome with the need to understand, Claire found herself gravitating toward Bryce's courage, its silent proclamation slipping seamlessly into the core of her once guarded heart. In grace illumined only by courage, Bryce's story unveiled truths Claire had resisted for far too long. His deeds were now a beacon guiding her out of the dense forest of her own myopia. Suddenly, Bryce's earlier interventions on the flight, his steadying influence, the innate kindness tethered with no threads of obligation, weighed profoundly against the backdrop of the broadcast. She recognized her error not merely as an isolated decision, but as a systemic fault etched in unexamined assumptions. Claire remained motionless, horizon wrenched from complacence. In wanting to dismiss Bryce as an inconvenience, she inadvertently absorbed the real cost of prejudice, distance maintained between souls related by deeper resonance than surface encounters revealed. She had failed to acknowledge his humanity beneath the insignia of his uniform. "I've been a fool," Claire breathed, the intimate whisper gratified by the emptiness encompassing her. The evening deepened, cloaking herself in a delicate tension. An incandescent gratitude welled within, the seed of bitter truth flowering into something pure. The screen continued detailing Bryce's unyielding efforts, unspooling visual narratives of lives improved and communities resurrected under his guidance. For her, to see was to know, and with knowledge came an inescapable desire for redemption, a yearning that tugged insistently at her shuttered heart. All through the night, Bryce's portrayal played and replayed on a loop through her mind, his actions now rewriting the story she had prematurely ascribed to him. Claire found herself ensnared by an unscripted tapestry, a nuance unfurling from unseen threads stitched with each decision he made to better the human condition. While sleep eluded her, resolution emerged anew. Claire moved to her suitcase, retrieving the sleek laptop buried beneath curated layers. Guided by instinct and Bryce's story, she began to type, a letter composed with fingers trembling yet steadfast in their pursuit of righting her wrongs. Each keystroke encapsulated the unfurling of an emotional journey, painting her intent with raw sincerity. To Sergeant Bryce Daniels, she wrote, each word a heavy yet necessary exploration of repentance. It is with humility and newfound respect that I reach out. My actions were clouded by ignorance, failing to honor the values you embody. I apologize deeply for my behavior, realizing now the extraordinary individual gracing this world with dignity and courage. Detailing her gratitude, Claire acknowledged Bryce's composed leadership and poise as she faced the darkest moments of turbulence. She offered her admiration for his humanitarian achievements and confessed to the shift his actions had provoked in her perspective. Claire's intent flowed unrestrained, infused not only with regret but also with hope, a hope that their encounter could spark transformation in darkness repose. As the letter's words manifested on the virtual page, Her soul tentatively emerged, a sapling leaning toward an anticipated dawn. With a resigned certainty, she sent the message through a veterans organization associated with Bryce, closing with a promise unspoken, a promise to carry his integrity into her future actions. Yours sincerely, she finalized, Claire Thompson. The email's soft chime confirmed his departure into the digital ether, leaving her to confront the space where judgment once resided, a space now brimming with emancipation's potential unshackled. As she settled into an introspective solitude, Claire found herself immersed in contemplation, illuminated by an understanding outgrown from turbulence's heart. Bryce's narrative continued its quiet ascendance, spiraling into view with familiar persistence yet renewed joy. She watched night cloak the city beyond her hotel window, a flowing swathe of midnight promising reprisal beneath upon a land unchained within. In the merging realms of possibility, Claire unclosed upon an immutable truth, finding within Bryce's story an encomium to forgiveness. It was a beginning, one sculpted not by defiance but awakened acceptance, a testament to humanity resurrected from personal truth reclaimed within illuminating light. In the quietude of her hotel suite, Claire Thompson stared unseeing at the gauzy reflections of her surroundings, a gentle, persistent buzz of truth weaving through the fibers of her consciousness. The unscheduled landing had led her here, not just physically but resolutely toward a crossroads within herself. The encounter from the airplane whispered continuously, echoing a discord she had long left unchecked, now singing in stark contrast against the evening lull. Deliberate in her actions, Claire moved slowly, removing her heels with a practiced grace, a melody of routine pitted against the cacophony of her disrupted inner world. Her customary solitude morphed into a sanctuary, but today, its familiar walls reverberated with the somber undertones of a silent confrontation with identity. The television flickered silently in the corner, the muted hum a witness to deepening reflection. What had started as habitual background noise now captivated every shard of her attention. There, plastered across the screen, was Sergeant Bryce Daniels, an effortlessly poised figure walking purposefully amid scenes of collective sorrow and hope, war-torn landscapes punctuated by his distant, yet compellingly compassionate presence. Claire's breath hitched imperceptibly, tightening in her chest as she absorbed each word the news anchor relayed, poignant tales of bravery, selflessness, and immense dedication. Her earlier grievances, those sharp-edged judgments she'd held, began dissolving beneath the luminous, uplifting aura of Bryce's narrative. His actions have turned despair to hope, said the anchor, his voice unadulterated by bias, dripping with genuine admiration. Each line delivered was a fine stroke painting Bryce as an invaluable thread woven into a tapestry of feats too grave to ignore. Claire squinted her eyes nearly shut, focusing intensely on the only light her heart would follow out from shadows she never acknowledged. In the images on the screen, she saw Bryce leading frightened children away from chaos, smiles illuminating weary faces, kindness exuding from every gesture. How painfully wrong, how woefully unjust she had been in her haste to dismiss his worth based on the biases coursing through her own veins, ingrained too deeply by a history she hadn't bothered to challenge. As the evening matured, the city outside her window glittered, innumerable lights strung across the urban fabric, each a symbol of lives intertwined. Claire saw in those twinkling stipples the kindling of countless stories converging and diverging, Bryce's now intersecting forcibly with hers. She found herself standing before the large bay window, finding solace in the blanketed artistry alive beneath the deepening sky. Her reflection, superimposed over night's descent, offered little comfort. Instead, it forced her into confrontation. Bryce Daniels, she murmured the name tangibly, crystallizing not in condemnation but reverence. The flutter of her voice echoed regret, a lament for unwarranted words spilling over the opportunity to connect. In the shadows where self-pity once dwelled, a tender sprout of awareness began to unfurl. The afterimage of her arrogance battered Claire's thoughts until dormancy appended itself into vivid fruition, an emerging cognizance of being complicit in a much larger narrative, one demanding transformation upon those realizing its reach. Deep within her ached a remorseful need for rectification, a desire to make amends not just for Bryce, but something inside herself long ignored, long neglected. Disarmed by a clarity she hadn't anticipated, Claire turned to a neglected companion, the sleek laptop concealed within the meticulously arranged suitcases, another fixture in her subdued arsenal of deemed essentials. Yet tonight, as she gently retrieved its weight from the confines of her meticulously curated baggage, the device felt different, a catalyst for redemption rather than simple practicality. Setting it before her on the polished wood of the sprawling hotel desk, Claire opened its lid with intention, each motion driven by emotions raw and undiluted by that world she had briefly blurred. Words followed naturally, tentative at first, notions slipping forth like new leaves against the skepticism still anchoring fragments of her old self. But the sincerity ground in every keystroke empowered those letters to stand tall and true. Sergeant Bryce Daniels, she began, acknowledging in ink what her heart had recognized for the first time entirely. I'm reaching out to apologize for my actions, born not of understanding but ignorance, clouded by misjudgments that veil the incredible person you truly are. The letter flowed seamlessly from chastened thoughts, each sentence a bridge traversing the rift between misunderstanding and newfound enlightenment. Claire let the accumulated pain of unvoiced recognition bleed onto the page alongside an indebted gratitude for the unseen guidance Bryce had unknowingly proffered along her path to realization. She recounted the flight, the turbulence, and Bryce's unwavering influence, and confessed the monumental emotional course correction his televised story compelled within her. She felt exposed, vulnerable, yet resolutely unburdened by honesty. With each word came the frenetic desire not just to atone, but to evolve beyond her former barriers. She promised sincerely that she would carry this lesson forward, speak truth to power in whatever way she could, advocating for justice where neglect and inequity loomed. As Claire finished, the document on her screen glowed ethereally, not simply a letter, but a testament to growth, to the hidden wellspring bubbling inexorably toward a new beginning. Carefully folding the laptop's lid, she leaned back into the hotel chair she'd earlier resigned herself to, allowing the soaked silence to envelop her, a silence of contemplative grace unbroken by self-derived judgment. Sending the email felt like relinquishing a ship into the sea, an act symbolizing closure, buoyant in freedom pursued within forgiving currents. Postured alone in the dim hotel room, Claire welcomed the gentle affirmations of redemption's promise, revelations inscribed upon her consciousness, welding their burning truths inseparably to the core of what should be. Bryce's time-worn fortitude now lapped at her senses, washing the fear-stoked grains of prejudice from places hollowed by past ignorance. Her soul, brilliantly human, fallible yet relentless, yearned now to be an ally, a friend with which deference had replaced derision. The night descended fully, its embrace both comforting and daunting in the boundless possibilities it heralded, a reminder of her duty, renewed with the cadence from light's inevitable return. Within that solitude, Claire softly whispered words she would repeat without hesitation, "Let this be my beginning." And so imbued with purpose, Claire drifted into a nascent realm warmed by burgeoning empathy and hope, a realm where dreams sketched by humility and humanity intertwined, carving paths more luminous than those she had traversed before. In the quiet solitude of her hotel suite, Claire Thompson gazed out of the window, the outlines of the city blurred by the mist of her racing mind. The cool glass beneath her palms anchored her as she processed the seismic shift within her, influences subtle yet potent, pushing her toward an internal reckoning she could no longer avoid. The unscheduled landing had deposited her not just in the geographic midpoint of her journey home, but within the tempest of self-realization. Ever since the encounter with Bryce Daniels, the soldier whom she had erroneously judged on the plane, her thoughts had spiraled with insistent whispers demanding her attention. The robust silence of the room contrasted sharply with the chaotic symphony of emotion swirling inside her. Claire removed her heels and settled into the plush armchair, allowing every nuance of her encounter with Bryce to replay in her mind. The words exchanged, and those unspoken, hung in the air like a soft-lit gallery of her shortcomings, each a painful reflection she was now forced to confront. Her eyes flitted over to the television, which had been left casting a muted glow across the room. There on the screen, Bryce was once again in the spotlight. The newscaster chronicled his achievements with reverence, rendering Claire helpless but to listen. She absorbed the narrative of his life with a blend of awe and remorse, a tapestry of courage and compassion juxtaposed against her unjustified assumptions. With each detail, the weight of her actions on the flight pressed heavily on her chest. Bryce's valor and humility radiated through the screen, a beacon she had initially dismissed out of hand. How astonishingly blind she had been, mired in her prejudice, missing the profound grace in a man standing not 10 feet away. His actions have turned despair to hope, the anchor's voice recounted, a verdict that carried to the depths of Claire's conscience. She watched as Bryce, poised yet unassuming, navigated through visuals of a world resonating with turmoil and aspirations renewed by his very presence. An unfamiliar tightness gripped her throat as she let his story seep into her, the contrast a stark illumination against her former ignorance. She pictured Bryce aboard the plane once more, his steady composure amidst the turbulence, a man marked not by creed or color but by deeds she now yearned to honor. She found herself speaking his name aloud, Bryce Daniels. The syllables were foreign yet comforting, a mantra solidifying into reverence. It was no longer a name tied to her prejudice, but one she vowed to associate with inspiration. The windows hinted at dawn beneath a cobalt sky, and in those glimmers, Claire saw a reflection liberated from the shackles of misconception. She realized with clarity that this moment demanded more than introspection. It necessitated action, a step toward honoring the truth newly discovered in her heart. With resolve igniting her fingertips, Claire fetched her laptop from the suitcase nestled meticulously beside the bed. It felt different in her hands now, a vessel for change, no longer just an appendage of routine and efficiency. She set it upon the desk, her reflection mirrored dimly in the blank screen, which she swiftly illuminated. Words once mired in judgment now flowed with earnest sincerity. She hesitated, searching for a beginning. The prelude became an invocation of humility, a newfound deference to Bryce's humanity, and an apology from the depths of her transformed soul. Sergeant Bryce Daniels, I must express my deepest apologies for my actions during our flight, words and behavior born not of understanding but entrenched misjudgments. I was blind to the incredible person you are, cloaked in ignorance that I am irrevocably seeking to learn from. With each keystroke, Claire bridged the chasm between misunderstanding and redemption. Her fingers danced across letters forming sentences embodying the heartfelt regret that suffused her spirit. She recounted the flight's unexpected turbulence, the very source of her upheaval transformed into testimony to Bryce's unwavering leadership. The sincerity of her emotion sought not just to atone, but to forge a path forward, coded in promise and advocacy. Every sentence was a plea for forgiveness entwined with gratitude for the impact he had unknowingly bestowed upon her, a lesson in humility she vowed to carry forward. Your story is shared by the media compel me to confront my own prejudices, leading to a course correction which I now embrace wholeheartedly. I am humbled by your strength and have drawn inspiration to challenge the societal inequities I once overlooked. Claire breathed deeply, pacing her words, each a step further toward the light Bryce's actions had unveiled. Her letter became an offering, a symbol of her faith in human potential to aspire, adapt, and reciprocate kindness amidst legacies marred by old prejudices. Ending with promises she was resolute to keep, Claire pledged ongoing efforts to embody the change her heart longed for, willing to collaborate and listen where her past deafened her to justice. She saved her document, a tangible testament to a journey begun not just through contrition, but spurred by an earnest desire for authentic representation and inclusive connection. As she leaned back, pushing the laptop away gently, a tension unwound inside her chest, a certainty akin to the unfurling dawn outside. The email would soon traverse the digital realm, but within cellular arrays lay a personal milestone, one marked by intricate resonance and a humanizing shared understanding. And perhaps, to her relief and hope, it would signify a beginning anew. She spoke aloud, softly yet unwavering, "Let this be my beginning." Her whisper repeated, a silent echo promising redemption amid the vibrant collage of reflections softly shifting across the room. With dawn's embrace unfurling fully at last, Claire found herself swept by a tide of gentle redemption. She lay back on the bed, cradled within the golden sheen of the emerging day, a harbinger of dreams no longer bounded by prejudice, but by the freedom of an awakened soul eager to traverse paths yet unimagined and beautifully inclusive. The new day heralded her allegiance to change, a whispered vow ensconced among hopes sketching futures more intricate and bright than yesterday. For her, for Bryce, and perhaps for all those who dared navigate truths waiting to be perceived. Claire Thompson sat, entrapped by her thoughts as Dawn's gentle fingers stole into her hotel room, painting the walls with muted pastels. Gone was the self-assured businesswoman who had boarded the plane with swift efficiency. In her place lingered someone forced into introspection, grappling with the silhouettes of her misjudgments and the stark truth unveiled by circumstance. Her mind returned obsessively to the flight, vivid recollections rendered in sharp relief against the backdrop of her newfound awareness. She recalled the steady resolve in Bryce Daniels' eyes, a steadfastness that seemed unperturbed by the weight of her harsh words. He stood in stark contrast to the chaos that reigned outside the fuselage, guiding others with an ease that belied danger. Those moments of quiet heroism now etched themselves into her memory, not as a man confined by prejudice, but one marked by unassuming valor. It was this very perception that had clawed insistently at Claire's conscience, forcing an unsettling self-reckoning that she could not ignore. The news segment had unraveled her preconceptions further, unfurling Bryce's accolades with the subtle majesty of a revelation. His likeness dominated the screen, a soldier quietly resilient, a man whose life's work was defined by deeds that encapsulated bravery and compassion in equal measure. The realization was a sermonic jolt, eclipsing prior assumptions with a radiant burst of truth, a stark declaration of how wrong she had been, blinded by biases inherited and maintained within the folds of her past. As the reports chronicled his selfless acts overseas, the veritable bombshell of his heroism shattered any residual barriers in her heart, compelling a heartfelt need to atone. In those solitary moments, Claire decided she could not allow ignorance to dictate her path any longer. Action, not mere rumination, was imperative. With renewed determination, she retrieved her laptop, symbolizing a bridge between past transgressions and a promising tomorrow. The keyboard awaited her fingers impatiently, the anticipation of unspoken words poised on its pristine face. Driven by sincerity, she began typing, her fingers orchestrating a symphony of redemption on the keys, composing an apology etched with everything she felt. Sergeant Bryce Daniels, the letter began, I write this from a place of deep contrition and recognition of the profound errors in my behavior towards you. On our flight, I allowed ignorance to cloud my perception, resulting in unwarranted prejudice that was mine and mine alone. As her words took shape, they melded seamlessly, intertwining with unfiltered intent. Claire drew upon the dichotomy of their interaction, the turbulence that unfolded not just in the skies, but within her own soul. The truth of your essence, she continued, her heart swelling with admiration, was denied by my preconceptions. I understand now, more than ever, how critical it is for each of us to combat the biases that limit our understanding of one another. Claire paused, reflecting on the sentiments she had already written. Each sentence resonated with a visible sincerity only her heart could discern, offering glimpses of unseen wounds laid bare for healing. She yearned not just for forgiveness, but also for a chance to honor him, moving forward with authenticity and respect. Her words crafted a narrative, laying bricks of genuine contrition upon a foundation of awakening. I was humbled by your patience, your quiet strength evident throughout the tempest we endured. Your grace amidst my impropriety inspires me beyond mere alteration. It drives me toward advocacy for change. She recalled Bryce's compassion during the chaotic moments on board, leadership unmarred by others' failings, including her own. His calm had instilled a quiet courage that now burgeoned within her, urging her further along a path where understanding precedes judgment. Claire promised to extend Bryce's impact beyond mere acknowledgement. She assured him that she would engage actively in dialogues, community work, and internal reflection to dismantle prejudices. Her privilege, she decided, was her responsibility, platform from which she could champion justice. The thought emboldened her. It is my desire to contribute to a world where stories such as yours, stories embodying courage and empathy, uplift and inspire collective unity. This letter is my beginning, an oath of mindful improvement and dedication to the principles of equity and respect. Claire finished writing, inhaling deeply before affixing her signature, a final affirmation of sincerity anchored with hope. She read through the letter once more, ensuring her intent remained clear and untarnished, an embodiment of change she wholly embraced. Sitting back, Claire marveled at the tangible promise her letter represented. It was an olive branch extending into unknown realms, vulnerable yet fortifying. In sending it, she demonstrated a nascent faith, believing the mistakes of yesterday could indeed fertilize the compassion of tomorrow. With the email dispatched, what coursed through her brought an unanticipated lightness, relief and resolve weaving together a hopeful tapestry upon which she would script the chapters to come. Outside, dawn flourished with elegant indifference, offering its blessings indiscriminately. As Claire prepared to return to Atlanta and to a life she now knew demanded action born of introspection, she found herself universalized within its glow. Her narrative echoed not just a singular shift, but a bridge reaching toward broader testimonies of empathy and reconciliation. She mumbled into that growing light, words rendered unnecessary by the depth of their quiet proclamation, for him and for all of us who dare to see. With a heart changed by intent and actions that followed, Claire Thompson stepped forth into the burgeoning day, ready to embrace the unknown futures she felt destined and willing to navigate anew. In the quiet sanctum of her hotel room, Claire Thompson felt as though the world had both shrunk and expanded around her. The dawning realization of her own ignorance enveloped her, an unyielding cocoon, pressing close yet offering the promise of metamorphosis. This was a pivotal moment. She was acutely aware of it. The air in the room seemed to hold its breath, as if urging her to make every word matter, every syllable a bridge across the chasm her words had carved. The early autumn light filtered through the curtains, gently illuminating the room in a soft amber glow, casting long shadows across the walls. Claire picked up her laptop, its cool metallic surface a stark contrast to the warmth she hoped to convey. She hesitated briefly before opening her email, the cursor blinking expectantly on the screen, waiting like a sentinel at the edge of new territory. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard before finally descending with purpose. She began her message with a salutation that felt both formal and deeply personal. "Dear Sergeant Bryce Daniels." The words were simple yet confessional, a gateway to the complex labyrinth of emotions that surged beneath the surface. "I find myself at a crossroads," she typed, "and I owe that unexpected juncture to our encounter." Claire paused, considering the weight of those words. They carried a truth more profound than any she had confronted in years. The flight had been more than just a journey through physical space. It had propelled her into an emotional and ethical voyage, demanding a confrontation with the biases she had unwittingly allowed to map the contours of her world. She recalled the calm endurance Bryce had displayed, his conduct a testament to both his professional training and innate kindness. Her admiration for this quiet resilience was tangible now, punctuating each sentence with an authenticity she hoped he could feel through the digital ether. "When we met, my actions were dictated by ingrained fears and inherited wrongs," she confessed. Her ego struggled against the vulnerability that admission required, yet the truth was liberating. "Your composure in the face of such undeserved contempt spoke volumes of your character and highlighted to me the insufficiency of judgment I had been harboring." Writing the letter was an exercise in humility, each keystroke a salve for wounds she had both suffered and inflicted. Those wounds were not physical but emotional constructs, centuries old yet all too present. She aspired to dismantle these biases, not just for herself but for the communities entangled in their systemic roots. "I recognize now the opportunity you granted me, to witness not just your valor but the essence of a humanity I chose to overlook," she continued. Claire wanted to craft her apology with a sincerity that Bryce could trust, evoking a recognition of behavior she now unequivocally repudiated. Beside her, a steaming cup of tea cooled slowly, wisps of steam curling upward, momentarily drawing her attention. The air was charged with an expectancy, as if the world lingered between breaths. Claire felt an ardent desire to express, to rectify in some measure the dissonance her actions had sown, to allow the melody of understanding to play once more. "Championing change requires that one first become an agent of that change," she mused, the thought both daunting and invigorating. "Your patience and your strength catalyzed a transformation within me, one that I am committed to nurturing through advocacy and a reshaping of my own perspectives." While her words flowed with grace on the screen, each proposition challenged her to envision the evolution she sought, not a mere superficial adjustment, but a deep-seated revolution within her worldview. Claire's mind raced with the possibilities spurred by this newfound awareness. The communities she could assist, the dialogues she could foster, each a step toward ensuring stories like Bryce's inspired rather than disheartened. "If you see fit to forgive my transgressions," she concluded, "I promise to honor that gift by championing stories such as yours, works that speak to courage and resilience, transforming them into symbols of unity over division." As she typed her signature, each stroke resonated with a tinkling finality, signifying the tangible earnestness behind every word etched into the email. Before sending it, she reread the letter, heart thundering, ensuring the honesty she felt wasn't lost in translation. These were not just words. They represented a tangible hope for redemption. In sending the email, Claire felt the looming burden of past errors lightening, not erased, but charged with purpose, transmuted by intent. The message now a beacon she intended to pursue, guiding her toward actions that aligned with the new principles she chose to espouse. As she leaned back, a sense of clarity enveloped her like the tide reclaiming the shore. The sun climbed steadily, drenching the room with a forgiving light, embracing the start anew that promised growth from the roots of genuine atonement. Stepping into that light, Claire resolved to navigate her course with compassion, determination, and an unwavering commitment to justice. Where judgment once held sway, advocacy and understanding would flourish. Claire allowed herself a smile, a brief but genuine expression of hope as she envisioned the shared journey ahead, not just for herself but for all those she might reach through the powerful efficacy of words laid thoughtfully bare. Through the window, Autumn's vibrant tapestry unfurled across the horizon, an affirmation of change, urging her forward. Claire recognized this allegory, that each choice, each action, each word, had the unfathomable potential to kindle a change not only within her own heart, but the world beyond. Claire knew, as she prepared to leave the room and rejoin the cacophony of life, that she was stepping into a reality of her own making, one underscored by dignity and hope, knit from the fabric of new beginnings laced with empathy. In the quiet sanctum of her hotel room, Claire Thompson felt as though the world had both shrunk and expanded around her. The dawning realization of her own ignorance enveloped her, an unyielding cocoon, pressing close yet offering the promise of metamorphosis. This was a pivotal moment. She was acutely aware of it. The air in the room seemed to hold its breath, as if urging her to make every word matter, every syllable a bridge across the chasm her words had carved. The early autumn light filtered through the curtains, gently illuminating the room in a soft amber glow, casting long shadows across the walls. Claire picked up her laptop, its cool metallic surface a stark contrast to the warmth she hoped to convey. She hesitated briefly before opening her email, the cursor blinking expectantly on the screen, waiting like a sentinel at the edge of new territory. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard before finally descending with purpose. She began her message with a salutation that felt both formal and deeply personal. Dear Sergeant Bryce Daniels. The words were simple yet confessional, a gateway to the complex labyrinth of emotions that surged beneath the surface. I find myself at a crossroads, she typed, and I owe that unexpected juncture to our encounter. Claire paused, considering the weight of those words. They carried a truth more profound than any she had confronted in years. The flight had been more than just a journey through physical space. It had propelled her into an emotional and ethical voyage, demanding a confrontation with the biases she had unwittingly allowed to map the contours of her world. She recalled the calm endurance Bryce had displayed, his conduct a testament to both his professional training and innate kindness. Her admiration for this quiet resilience was tangible now, punctuating each sentence with an authenticity she hoped he could feel through the digital ether. When we met, my actions were dictated by ingrained fears and inherited wrongs, she confessed. Her ego struggled against the vulnerability that admission required, yet the truth was liberating. Your composure in the face of such undeserved contempt spoke volumes of your character and highlighted to me the insufficiency of judgment I had been harboring. Writing the letter was an exercise in humility, each keystroke a salve for wounds she had both suffered and inflicted. Those wounds were not physical but emotional constructs, centuries old yet all too present. She aspired to dismantle these biases, not just for herself but for the communities entangled in their systemic roots. I recognize now the opportunity you granted me, to witness not just your valor but the essence of a humanity I chose to overlook, she continued. Claire wanted to craft her apology with a sincerity that Bryce could trust, evoking a recognition of behavior she now unequivocally repudiated. Beside her, a steaming cup of tea cooled slowly, wisps of steam curling upward, momentarily drawing her attention. The air was charged with an expectancy, as if the world lingered between breaths. Claire felt an ardent desire to express, to rectify in some measure the dissonance her actions had sown, to allow the melody of understanding to play once more. Championing change requires that one first become an agent of that change, she mused, the thought both daunting and invigorating. Your patience and your strength catalyzed a transformation within me, one that I am committed to nurturing through advocacy and a reshaping of my own perspectives. While her words flowed with grace on the screen, each proposition challenged her to envision the evolution she sought, not a mere superficial adjustment, but a deep-seated revolution within her worldview. Claire's mind raced with the possibilities spurred by this newfound awareness. The communities she could assist, the dialogues she could foster, each a step toward ensuring stories like Bryce's inspired rather than disheartened. If you see fit to forgive my transgressions, she concluded, I promise to honor that gift by championing stories such as yours, works that speak to courage and resilience, transforming them into symbols of unity over division. As she typed her signature, each stroke resonated with a tinkling finality, signifying the tangible earnestness behind every word etched into the email. Before sending it, she reread the letter, heart thundering, ensuring the honesty she felt wasn't lost in translation. These were not just words. They represented a tangible hope for redemption. In sending the email, Claire felt the looming burden of past errors lightening, not erased, but charged with purpose, transmuted by intent. The message now a beacon she intended to pursue, guiding her toward actions that aligned with the new principles she chose to espouse. As she leaned back, a sense of clarity enveloped her like the tide reclaiming the shore. The sun climbed steadily, drenching the room with a forgiving light, embracing the start anew that promised growth from the roots of genuine atonement. Stepping into that light, Claire resolved to navigate her course with compassion, determination, and an unwavering commitment to justice. The next day, stepping into a bustling community center with the vibrancy of youthful energy, Claire felt the surging tremors of uncertainty and resolve. Her first engagement promised dialogues on racial inequality, conversations that she would have once sidestepped, but now she yearned to embrace with a listening heart. "Welcome," the director greeted her warmly, offering a smile that lit the dim corridor. "We're glad to have your insight today." Claire met the gaze with a depth that startled even herself. "Trust in my path is what I seek to grow," she replied, her voice gentle yet firm. It was not just her personal redemption she sought, but the hope of becoming a bridge for others. Throughout the day, as stories unfolded around her in vivid hues of struggle and triumph, Claire wove her presence into the tapestry of shared experiences. She listened, learned, and began to understand the profound resilience and shared humanity that transcended the divides she sought to mend. Her contributions and empathy, while new, were heard with grace, igniting the start of many friendships and the beginning of a journey woven intricately with both introspection and outreach. As autumn's vibrant tapestry unfurled across the horizon, Claire recognized this allegory, that each choice, each action, each word had the unfathomable potential to kindle a change not only within her own heart, but the world beyond. Even as uncertainties lay ahead, Claire's conviction burned brightly, an enduring testament to her transformation, a promise to herself, to Bryce, and to all those who dared to believe in justice enveloped in compassion. Through this redemptive journey, she understood that the past would serve as a guidepost, a compass infinitely pointing toward a horizon painted afresh with dignity, understanding, and unity. Claire walked into the same cafe where they had agreed to meet, her fingers toying nervously with the strap of her handbag. It was an unassuming spot, nestled at the corner of a bustling street. The mellow aroma of fresh coffee intermingled with the sounds of conversation and clinking cups. An afternoon sunbeam streamed through the window, painting the wooden floor with patches of warmth. She spotted Bryce sitting at a small table by the window, a gentle expression on his face that made him simultaneously look at ease and focused. It hadn't been long since she sent the email, yet the time between felt like a decade, filled with introspection, planning, and change. From an email response that was surprisingly gracious and open, Bryce had suggested this meeting. This chance to extend beyond apology and foster understanding marked a significant moment for Claire, and one she approached with a blend of hope and trepidation. "Claire," he greeted, standing up with an open hand and that same calm demeanor she'd observed on the flight. His uniform was replaced with casual wear, and the change seemed to soften him further, making his presence less formal yet equally commanding. "Bryce," she replied with genuine warmth, taking his hand. The simplicity of the gesture was profound and binding, their past encounter now an anchor, yet not a shackle, to their dialogue. They exchanged polite greetings and sat down, the air between them charged with a shared yet unsaid recognition of all that had passed. Claire adjusted her position, aligning herself to the present moment with attentiveness that hadn't always come naturally. "Thank you for agreeing to meet me," she began after a moment, sincerity etched in her voice. "I realize how much my actions must have, well, how much they affected things." Bryce smiled, a gleam of understanding in his eyes. "What matters is where we go from here, right? People aren't fixed points. We're more like rivers shifting over time." His words were a balm, soothing the nervous knots tangled within her. The setting sun outside cast an orange glow that filtered into the cafe, painting Bryce in a golden hue, not unlike a halo. It complemented the gentle authority he exuded. "Rivers," Claire mused, turning the metaphor over in her mind like a small, precious stone. "I've been trying to understand the currents that have shaped me and how to change their direction." Their early conversation flowed around topics light and varied, from discussing favorite books to common interests in travel. Surrounded by the noise of coffeehouses life, Claire eased into an authenticity that surprised her. She was still fragile, exposed, but Bryce's openness served as both a channel and a salve, easing her navigation through this uncharted territory. At one point, Bryce leaned forward, his tone becoming more introspective. "What was the turning point for you, if you don't mind my asking?" Claire paused, considering the question with the thoughtfulness it deserved. I suppose, she started slowly, it was that same night, watching the news, seeing your story. Realizing how wrong I'd been. You were saving lives, making a real difference, while I clung to misconceptions. The honesty lay bare between them, vulnerable yet essential. There was no sharp rebuke in Bryce's eyes, only a quiet resolve and an invitation to share in the spirit of growth. Part of why I stayed calm on the plane was because I've learned that battles are won not by reaction, but by example, he replied, a gentle smile playing on his lips. It's easier to choose anger, but to choose empathy, that's where real strength is. Claire marveled at his perspective. You've already impacted more people than you know. Meeting you, it was like opening a window to a new world. A window through which I could see kindness, strength, and integrity without the filters of my prejudice. They both laughed softly, the mutual relief evident. It was a shared understanding that expanded with each shared insight, weaving a tapestry of friendship from threads formerly frayed and misunderstood. As they talked, they broached the topic of community work. Claire was candid about her desire to involve herself in advocacy, to contribute more actively to social causes that resonated with a sense of justice and fairness. Bryce listened, offering insights from his own experiences in advocacy within the military community. Stories, he said thoughtfully, leaning back, can either divide or unite. It makes all the difference in how they're told and who gets to own them. The sincerity of his words resonated deeply within Claire. In those moments, she understood that her role, minor yet significant, will be to help craft narratives that fostered unity rather than division, to give a platform to those whose stories deserve to be told with dignity. Their conversation lingered over the ways they could collaborate, infusing shared passions into projects that would provide voices for the silenced. The prospect excited Claire, galvanizing her with newfound energy and purpose. Before she knew it, the afternoon melted into twilight, with shadows stretching long across the cafe. Claire and Bryce stood to leave, time having passed unnoticed in the warmth of burgeoning camaraderie. This was a good beginning, Bryce said, meeting her eyes with a steadfast glimmer of trust. Let's make sure it's not the end. Claire nodded, feeling a sense of belonging and affirmation. Agreed, she said earnestly. I look forward to what we can achieve together. As they left the cafe, the chill of the early evening air was countered by the warmth of connection, a connection not merely built on an apology, but on an evolving shared journey of growth, compassion, and meaningful action. In redefining her relationship not only with Bryce but with herself, Claire stepped into a wider world altered by insight, commitment, and renewed vision. In unison, their footsteps moved purposefully forward, echoing through the evening streets as a testament to the power of reconciliation and the boundless potential of unexpected friendship. As they exited the cafe, the city of Atlanta welcomed Claire and Bryce with a bustling rhythm, the evening lights twinkling like a constellation of aspirations above them. The air was crisp, carrying with it a promise of new beginnings and the subtle fragrance of autumn leaves which danced about their feet, a reminder of nature's cycle of change. Overhead, the swirling indigo sky edged deeper into night, and the streetlights flickered to life, casting a warm glow over the pavements. Claire felt invigorated, each breath in this shared moment with Bryce infused with a sense of renewal she hadn't anticipated but warmly embraced. It was rare, she realized, how moments such as these could so profoundly alter one's course. Walking side by side, their pace unhurried, Claire stole a glance toward Bryce now and then, appreciating the ease that had begun to settle between them. It was hard to fathom that only weeks prior, she had been consumed by prejudice and fear, a narrow view born of ignorance nurtured by biases unchallenged until now. Bryce, can I ask you something? She ventured, her voice cutting through the gentle din of passing cars and the murmurs of pedestrians. Of course, Bryce replied, the sincerity in his expression encouraging her to continue. How do you maintain such composure? Claire asked, curiosity tinged with admiration shining in her eyes. Even when you faced, well, everything on that flight, and every injustice before or since? Bryce took a moment, his gaze focusing on the swirling leaves at their feet, as if they held the secret to his steadfast nature. I suppose it comes down to something my grandmother used to say. Understanding is the first step to acceptance, and only with acceptance can there be peace. It's a principle that grounds me. Claire digested this, the words resonating within her like an echo from a distant, yet hopeful future. Acceptance, she murmured, testing the weight of its promise. I've had so much to learn about that, yet I've only touched the surface. Bryce gave a soft chuckle, his presence a calming yet inspiring force. Learning's a lifetime journey. What's remarkable is that you're choosing to walk that path. They continued in companionable silence for a few more steps, the city unfolding around them like the gradual opening of a flower to daylight, a vibrant, living tapestry filled with stories waiting to be told, each unique and valuable in its own right. At a pedestrian stoplight, Claire paused and turned, seizing the moment to reflect on their earlier conversation. You mentioned earlier about stories, their power to divide or unite. Bryce nodded, prompting her to continue. I've been thinking about that a lot, especially in terms of how I can contribute, Claire admitted, a spark of determination igniting her resolve. I want to help create platforms that elevate these voices, these narratives of strength and resilience, the ones that deserve to be heard. Her declaration hung in the air, a bold commitment that sought transcendence beyond mere words. Bryce responded not with surprise but with a knowing nod, as though he had already seen this potential in her long before she'd realized it herself. The platform is only as powerful as the intention behind it, he said. Intentionality and authenticity, those are the keys. Claire nodded, feeling the gravity of his words settle within her. They felt like a lighthouse beam cutting through the fog, clear, steady, and guiding her toward undiscovered possibilities. As they crossed the street, a nearby storefront caught Claire's attention. Its window showcased a vibrant tapestry of community events and advocacy initiatives. Inspiration flared within her, and without realizing it, she came to a halt, Bryce stopping beside her with a puzzled yet patient expression. I think, she began, her mind piecing together fragmented ideas into something more cohesive. I think we could start here. In our own city. Share stories through events, workshops, art, whatever it takes. Make it a space where people can listen, learn, and grow. Just like I have. Bryce's expression lit up with an approving glow. That sounds ambitious, yet doable. I'd love to be part of that vision. The light in Claire's eyes shimmered with gratitude and ambition. Together, she said, her voice unwavering. Let's see how far we can take it. With that shared goal tying them together, they continued through the cityscape, buoyed by their collaborative spirit. Claire could feel the contours of the city, the diverse mosaic of lives and stories shaping her resolve, like clay molded under her hands, each imprint left signifying a step toward a future colored by empathy and understanding. The promise of dawn tugged at the horizon as they eventually returned to their respective paths, hearts fuller for the exchange and inspired by the endless potential their newfound alliance whispered of. The world they envisioned would begin with small, deliberate actions, rippling outward into the broader discourse of human connection and societal change. A journey had begun, a bridge built from a broken past toward a hopeful future, illuminated by the light of reconciliation and the warmth of shared purpose. For Claire and Bryce, the road ahead stretched vast and unwritten, yet they moved forward with the unshakable belief in what could be achieved, united by their vision and transformed by their friendship, a legacy they were poised to nurture and grow for the generations to walk.